What's up, Big Bear Nation, and welcome back to the homestead. Well, you've decided to get ducks. You know how to care for them. So now comes the fun part. We get to decide which ones you're going to have on your homestead. Now there's several different breeds, some of which I'm not even going to mention in this video. But I wanted to help you kind of narrow down your decision on what kind of breeds you're going to need for your homestead. Now, like with any other animal that you decide to bring onto your homestead, the first thing you really got to think about is what's your why? What's your motivation for having these animals on your homestead? Because ultimately, any animal you bring on, you're responsible for. You have to have shelter for it, you have to have food for it. And so we got to make sure that our intentions are, in line with what we choose. So ducks can give you meat, ducks can give you eggs. So you have to decide which one of those you want, or in some cases there are some dual purpose, but I think I've kind of been clear before that while that's a great option, sometimes it kind of takes away from one or the other. So it might be best to have just a flock of meat and a flock of eggs. So we're going to go through some of these breeds that are available for you to be able to make a well-informed decision. Now let's first talk about meat breeds. The obvious choice is the Pekin or the Jumbo Pekin. Both of these are very good meat producers. They'll get you anywhere from about 7 or 8 pounds all the way up to 13 pounds. That's depending on whether it's a hen or a drake. Those are a great option. The other great thing about them is that their feed conversion rate is lower than a Cornish cross chicken. So they're a great option if you're looking for a meat bird. Now the other option is Muscovies, and that's what we raise here on our property. Now they don't get as big as a Pekin as quickly, but the males can get fairly large. They can get around 10 to 12 pounds with no problem, and their breast meat is fantastic. It looks like a filet mignon. Ask me how I know. Okay, now there are some other options out there for meat birds. They don't necessarily get as heavy as those two heavy hitters. So you have stuff like the Saxony, the Silver Appleyard, there's an Ancona, there's also a Rouen, I think is the pronunciation. And then also, surprisingly, the White Crested, it's a white bird and he's got a little white poof on the top of his head. That bird also will get you somewhere around in the 5 to 7 pound range. So any of these birds are also an option, but those two major ones, the Pekin and the Muscovy, are your heavy hitters as far as if you're strictly going for meat. Now let's talk about egg breeds. Now, like I said before, a lot of people don't think about ducks for eggs. We normally just think about chickens, but bakers absolutely love duck eggs. So if you're looking to have a little bit of a side gig, this is definitely something to consider. There are two breeds that I know of that are actually pretty good at laying eggs. The first one is the big time is the Khaki Campbell. The Khaki Campbell can lay over 300 plus eggs a year, and they'll lay them consistently. The other one is the runner duck. They're all different colors, just basically the runner duck. They stand up and run instead of squatting down and waddling like the rest of the ducks. They're actually pretty entertaining to watch. Now, those ducks don't lay nearly as many as the Khaki Campbells, but they're another option where they're right at about 200 or so eggs per year. There are some strains that actually get up closer to that 300 plus, but I'm not exactly sure which ones those are. Now, there are two other breeds of ducks that are not as well known, and you don't really normally hear them with eggs, but that's the Ancona and the Saxony. Now the Ancona will lay anywhere from 210 to 280 eggs a year, where the Saxony will lay anywhere from 190 to about 240, 250 eggs a year. So both of those are also good options. They're just not as well known. So if you're going to look for those, you may have to go through a hatchery to get those, as opposed to the khaki Campbells and the runner ducks are a little bit more available, like even at your local Tractor Supply or even some of your feed and seeds or within your local community. It's a lot easier to find those two than the Ancona and the Saxony. Now, if you've been paying attention, you probably heard a little bit of overlap there. There are two that we've had on both lists, and that's the Saxony and the Ancona. Now, the Saxony, like I said, was somewhere around 8 to 9 pounds, but they also lay about 190 to 240, 250 as far as eggs go. The other one is the Ancona, and that one is also around that 210 to 250 egg range, but this bird comes in a little bit smaller at 5 to 7 pounds. So both are a good option as far as dual purpose. There are also a couple of other options that are out there that are a little bit more popular as far as the names that you'll see going around, again, like either in your Tractor Supply or in your feed and seed, or maybe even in your local duck community. And those would be something like the blue or black Swedish, which we've had here before. They're a slightly large bird. They dress out somewhere between 5 to 6 pounds, make a great roasting bird. And they'll lay around 130 to 180 eggs per year. Now another one is the Cayuga. Now that one is extremely popular with people who are trying to get colorful eggs, because the Cayuga, they lay an egg that's like a blackish color, and then it changes. Throughout the time that the duck is laying the eggs, the color of the egg changes. So that's kind of a cool thing in and of itself. That could be a profit thing as well. You could sell those eggs and turn a pretty good profits for your homestead. Now those birds get around 4 to 6 pounds, and they'll lay again about that 130 to 180 eggs a year. Now another one that I really like, I think is a beautiful bird, is called the Welsh Harlequin. And I have a lot of friends that are raising these birds. Now they again only get between 4 and 5 pounds, but they'll lay about 150 eggs to 200 eggs a year. Now the reason why I'm giving you these dual purpose birds is that if you're thinking about for your side hustle to be able to sell ducks for meat to people, they don't necessarily want a 13-pound bird. They don't want to pay, however many dollars per pound for 13 pounds. A lot of people are just going to want that roasted duck that they can have for Christmas dinner or for some special occasion. And so these birds are perfect for that, and you can also keep them on your property for eggs as well. Now the last one, and we mentioned this guy before, which was kind of surprising, is the white-crested duck. Now again, only about 5 to 7 pounds, and they'll lay somewhere between 100 to 130 eggs a year. Now one that I want to also bring around, which if you do any research, you'll see people will say that Muscovies will lay quite a few eggs, 130 to 180, I think they said, a year, which would be on this list, right? Well, in my experience, they lay 3 to 4 times a year. They'll do probably like once a quarter, they'll have a nest, and they won't, if you don't get on top of it and you pick up every single one of those eggs, they are very broody. We have hens throughout the year that will just disappear, and they go off and find a little spot somewhere, and the next thing you know, 28 days later, they come waddling through with some ducks. Now as soon as they start to disappear, we start to notice they're not around, we do start trying to pay attention to see if we can find where she is, because like I've said before in my other videos, ducks are not the greatest of mothers. So for us, in order to be able to keep everything going, we want to make sure that we get a hold of those babies and to be able to perpetuate the cycle of the birds on our property. So while you might find that Muscovies are supposed to be good egg layers, for the most part, they're not consistent, and it's usually only to procreate. Well, I hope that little rundown of the different types of breeds and all of the different options that you have was helpful. I hope that you can make a decision based on that. I know for us on our homestead, we are currently running Muscovies. We will be in the spring doing pecans for meat, and we're going to buff up our population of Indian runner ducks, as well as add khaki Campbells, because I would really like to be able to have both. I used to be really big about dual purpose stuff, but I am finding that a lot of times that becomes more of a problem. You end up with a bird that's not quite good enough for meat because you have to raise them for so long, or they're not quite good enough at keeping up with egg supply, so you end up having to keep more of them to get the same end goal of either meat or eggs. So those would be my suggestions. Whatever you guys think, hopefully the information I gave you was helpful. Now, if you liked this video, maybe go back all the way to where we started talking about whether or not you should have ducks on your homestead. Thank you for stopping by the Big Bear Homestead. God bless. Have a nice day.